Rising expectations. This has been described as the revolution of rising expectations because it has indeed revolutionary implications. It is both the cause of much dissatisfaction and unhappiness and anxiety in particularly capitalist societies, and also the cause of much energy and creativity. I say capitalist societies because thinking about peasant societies where the traditional methods of agriculture have been going on for a long time, the expectations are not usually rising. At the most, you hope to do as well as your parents or grandparents, and the idea that each generation will do much better than the last, or that you, during your life, will see huge changes which improve your life, until pretty recently at least, with the introduction of all sorts of Western technologies and other things. Until recently there was no such expectation, and so this both meant that you were mildly contented. You were contented if you got as much as you had got before, and if you got a little windfall, that was great, but you didn't expect it to go on. And also you were in a way contented to leave it as it was. There was a great risk-averse feature of peasant societies, as has been pointed out, because you really couldn't afford to take serious risks because it would mean starvation and your children dying and so on and so on. So you stuck to the well-tried methods and didn't tinker too much. Now, in capitalist societies, the defining feature in many ways is, as Tawney puts it in the title of his book, the acquisitive society. They want to acquire more and more and more. And built into that is the ideology that we can better our lives, and that we should better our lives, and that we probably will better our lives. So you have a revolutionary expectation that you will be better off, richer, live a more technologically savvy life than your parents, and that in your own life you will see this happening. And certainly I have seen it in my own life in an extraordinary way. In every aspect of my life, the world I was born into just during the Second World War and in the post-war austerity years, was, in terms of medicine, in terms of transport, in terms of communications, and in terms of general income, far, far less affluent than we are now. No National Health Service and so on. And recently I did a calculation of what the mean average income, the real income, in other words, adjusted for inflation and everything else, the income of English people since the late 1950s and early 60s has gone up. It doubled by the 80s, and it doubled again. So we are now at least 4 times as affluent on average per person. Of course, it's unequally distributed. So some are very, very much more affluent, and some haven't gained nearly that much. But we are much richer. And if you look at old films of the 50s and 60s, and you look at the streets without the cars, and the houses are much smaller, and the lamp posts are giving less illumination, and the roads much narrower, and if you investigate the state of the hospitals and everything else and the schools, you'll find that it was incomparably smaller, less affluent than it is now. But the feature of the revolution of rising expectations is that as soon as you've gained something, you forget about it and you want more. Just to give an example from my life, I've seen this with technologies of computing. Each time I move from some ancient, antiquated, very slow, tiny memory machine to something twice as fast and twice as efficient. This, for a short time, was a great boon. And then I wanted the next generation and the next generation. And there the revolution has been far greater, of course. Comparing, I've just ordered some hard disks, and you get 2 terabytes for £25. Well, when I first bought mass storage of that kind, which was only 20 years ago, for that you'd have paid £2,500. So it's 100 times cheaper. And that's a revolution in 20 years, and of course it'll go on exponentially. But the dissatisfaction is that whatever you have, obviously you can see it with your children, they expect mobile phones, they expect transport systems of the kind, National Health Service of the kind, and when it doesn't work as well as they hoped, they are dissatisfied. They don't count their blessings. They assume their blessings. I do it as well. It's not just young people. But it means that you are always craving, never satisfied, and always wanting something more. Now that is a cause of deep anxiety and unhappiness for some people, or just irritation for others. But of course it's also a spur onwards, because if you, as they say, sit on your laurels, in other words, you're happy to have won something and then you don't bother again, then the dynamic, which is really the central dynamic that drives on our consumerist capitalist society, would go. If you said to people, you don't need to have a new car, you don't need to move home, you don't need to have more food, then what would the manufacturers do? They would soon run out of options. So satisfaction and contentment is the bane of the advertising industry, which is trying to stir up dissatisfaction. That's the whole point of it. Say you haven't got the best yet, why not strive for it? So when we're aware of this, we realize that as many religions, including Christianity and Buddhism and others, they suggest you live a simple life, you limit your wants and desires, and that is the way to happiness, rather than constantly living through a revolution of rising expectations.